Earlier this month, Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall made history, riding in the cockpit of an AI-piloted F-16 throughout a series of simulated close-quarters air-to-air engagements, more commonly known as good old-fashioned dogfights. These notional scraps pitted the Air Force's most advanced AI agents, a term used to describe the artificial intelligence models devised to pilot combat aircraft, against highly trained human fighter pilots with both notional 20mm cannons and close-range air-to-air missiles. And if all that wasn't crazy enough, according to Kendall, the AI agent in control of his aircraft was pretty evenly matched with the human pilot it was squaring off against. And we're not talking about your run-of-the-mill F-16 pilot here. We're talking about one of the most experienced and skilled aviators in the Force, a member of the US Air Force Test Pilot School, and a pilot with literally thousands of hours logged in the F-16 itself. The hard truth of the matter is the Air Force's AI fighter pilots are getting good, and I mean really good. But with so much misinformation and disinformation about artificial intelligence and its potential combat applications circling the internet at seemingly hypersonic speeds, it can be pretty tough to discern fact from fiction when it comes to this game-changing new technology. So let's try to cut through all the static, the media hyperbole, and the apocalyptic hot takes to find out what's really going on with the Air Force's ominously named Skyborg artificial intelligence effort. Because while the truth about artificial intelligence may not quite live up to all the hype, this is definitely a case where fact is even crazier than fiction. I'm Alex Hollings, and this is Air Power. Now, it's no secret that one of the primary drivers behind the American effort to field AI-piloted aircraft is the potential for conflict with China. And ground news makes it easier than ever to stay on top of stories like this and others while piercing right through the bias that is so commonly found in today's media coverage. Ground News is an aggregator that collects stories published by news outlets all around the world and puts them all in a single easy-to-read feed, allowing you to not only stay on top of things, but also to compare the way stories are covered depending on an outlet's political bias. Right here on Ground News, we can find coverage of the recent US Air Force air combat exercises that pitted an AI-piloted F-16 with Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall riding shotgun against another F-16 piloted by one of the Air Force's most experienced Viper pilots. And off to the right-hand side of the screen, we can see that coverage of this story has been pretty even across the political spectrum, with 141 total outlets covering the story, including 23 left-leaning, 22 right-leaning, and 70 centrist outlets. And that fairly even political distribution also translates directly to headlines, with right-leaning outlets using headlines like, "An AI-controlled fighter jet took the Air Force leader for a historic ride. What this means for war." Then left-leaning outlets using pretty similar language, like this headline that reads, "AI-powered fighter jet kept up with human pilot during the Air Force's historic experimental dogfight." Ground News isn't just a big part of my research, it's a big part of my day-to-day news consumption, and it can be for you too, for a real bargain. Just go to ground.news/sandbox with 2 X's, or follow the link in the description below to get 40% off the same Vantage plan that I use in my research. Again, that's ground.news/sandbox with 2 X's to get 40% off their Vantage plan to help you stay on top of things. Now, right up front, you should know that the Air Force's Skyborg program, which aims to incorporate AI-piloted combat aircraft into a new air warfare doctrine for the branch, is a massive topic, and this video will almost certainly have to be broken down into 2 parts. But I want to start back with this story about Frank Kendall riding shotgun in an AI-piloted F-16, because while this story has received a great deal of media coverage, one statement Kendall made after these exercises were over has not received the attention it's due. I'll quote him directly here. Basically, when you're in an engagement like that, what the two pilots are trying to do to gain an advantage is fly the most optimal possible trajectory for the aircraft, so you can get a missile off, and he's trying to do the same to you. So the skill of the pilots is really important. We were up against a pilot who had 2,000 or 3,000 hours of experience. He was very good. It was roughly an even fight, but against a less experienced pilot, the AI and the automation would have performed better. Now, Kendall was riding in the front seat of the Air Force's heavily modified X-62 Vista, a Block 30 F-16D that's no stranger to incorporating technology that's not found on any of the Air Force's operational Vipers, including multi-axis thrust vector control. But despite this aircraft's 3-decade-spanning tenure as a part of the Air Force's test pilot school, it now sits at the forefront of America's efforts to propel air combat into an entirely new era, one where conventionally crewed aircraft are accompanied by their own formations of AI-enabled drone fighters. Now, riding behind Kendall in the cockpit was one of the Air Force's very few Vista-qualified test pilots, trained to handle not just the unique capabilities of this testbed aircraft, but also its new AI software. At any point in the exercises, that test pilot could have shut down the AI agent and taken control of the aircraft if that was necessary for the safety of the jet, or its occupants, or anything else for that matter. But that has yet to occur in any of the test flights taking place since this effort made the leap to real aircraft back in December of 2022. Now, based on Kendall's statements, he rode along for between 10 and 12 different air combat scenarios, each one a bit different than the last, and each one controlled by one of 3 different AI agents being trained for this role. And that brings us back to that quote that I think deserves a bit more attention, because throughout these dozen or so engagements, Kendall described the AI as pretty evenly matched with its human competitor, a pilot he described as having some 2,000 or even 3,000 hours logged in the F-16. And that is nuts. And I don't think people realize just how nuts it is because they lack the context required to really appreciate it. You see, Air Force F-16 pilots will regularly see anywhere from 18 to 24 months of flight training in various trainer aircraft before they even see the inside of an F-16's cockpit. And then once assigned an F-16, they tend to accumulate between 180 to maybe 220 hours of flight time per year. And to be clear, those numbers can be curtailed dramatically for any number of reasons, ranging from maintenance on the aircraft, to secondary training requirements for the pilot, to even being promoted into more managerial roles that pull pilots away from their aircraft and toward the bureaucracy of managing a unit. So with most pilots usually only seeing about an hour and a half of flight time per sortie, you can see how it takes a long time to rack up 2,000 hours in the cockpit of an F-16. Most pilots won't get there until well past the midpoint in their career, maybe 12 to 15 years in if they've been pretty fortunate. And reaching 3,000 hours in your aircraft, for most pilots, never happens at all. In fact, back in 2014, the Air Force reported that fewer than 300 pilots in the world had ever accrued more than 3,000 hours in the F-16, despite it being the most widely operated fourth-generation fighter on the planet and having been in service since 1978. And to get a sense of what it takes to reach that figure, we can look to one of the most recent additions to the list, which came in 2020, when Lieutenant Colonel Bo Deers, the commanding officer of the 555th Expeditionary Fighter Squadron, crossed the 3,000-hour mark in his Viper after just 17 years of service and 6 combat deployments. In other words, Kendall wasn't just saying the AI piloting his aircraft was roughly comparable to a human F-16 pilot, but rather, he was saying that it was pretty evenly matched with among the most experienced and capable aviators on the planet. As we've discussed in previous videos, American fighter pilots, by and large, tend to see more cockpit time in their respective aircraft than nearly any of their peers on the international stage. Russian fighter pilots, as one example, will often reach their deployable combat units with only a few hundred hours of total flight time across all aircraft under their belt. And that paints a pretty daunting picture of the capability set these AI pilots can already bring to bear. But despite the seemingly common perception of AI as inherently superior to human pilots for all sorts of combat applications, and even despite Kendall's own praise, the Air Force does still have its work cut out for it before this technology is ready for the battlefield. Being able to dogfight is a huge step to that end, but it remains just one of many steps, with most still ahead. I'll quote Kendall again. The technology is not quite ready yet, but it's making very good progress. We got to see 3 different versions of it. They all performed, I think, in a way which suggests to me personally very strongly that we're on the right path, and we're going to get to where we're headed. Now, this is just one facet of the Air Force's broader endeavor to use AI as an air combat force multiplier, known pretty ominously as Skyborg. And while the road to Skyborg is still quite long, it's easy to see why the Air Force is so invested. I'll quote Kendall one more time. They don't get tired. They don't get scared. They're relentless. It's easy to see a situation where they're going to be able to do this job better than humans can do. But in order to understand what the Air Force has accomplished here, and even more importantly, the nature of the challenges still ahead, we need to dispel some of the most commonly traded myths about artificial intelligence and its potential for combat applications. Because we can't discuss where AI is going if we don't understand where it is. Despite the ways artificial intelligence tends to be presented in pop culture and in online discussions, we should really think of the phrase as a broadly encompassing catch-all category for a wide variety of machine learning and automation technologies, none of which really live up to the apocalyptic visions of Skynet that so many tend to conjure. Sure, you'll find some spotlight-chasing internet clout goblins claiming systems like Google's Lambda have achieved sentience, or even a fair share of overly enthusiastic tech startup CEOs making claims about miracle breakthroughs. But the AI systems that exist today are much more limited in scope and in capability than many would have you believe. And this problem is really exacerbated by news outlets so eager to capitalize on popular fears about AI that they continue to run headlines about AI-controlled military drones taking out their own command elements in order to accomplish their objectives, even months or now more than a year after that story was proven to be nothing more than a hypothetical thought experiment. I'm going to quote Alison Gopnik, a professor of psychology who's a part of the AI research group at the University of California, Berkeley. We call it artificial intelligence, but a better name might be extracting statistical patterns from large data sets. The computational capacities of current AI, like large language models, don't make it any more likely that they are sentient than rocks or other machines are. Or, as the Congressional Research Service put it, currently, AI technologies are highly tailored to particular applications or tasks, known as narrow or weak AI. In contrast, general or strong AI refers to intelligent behavior across a range of cognitive tasks, a capability which is unlikely to occur for decades, according to most analysts. Now, as that statement was sort of getting at, artificial intelligence is generally categorized by either its type or its functionality. But in either regard, the categorization is determined by the system's level of overall capability. The 3 types of AI are generally considered to be narrow AI, general AI, and super AI. Super AI is strictly theoretical at this point, and it's the sort of system that movies have taught us to be worried about for decades. These systems are so complex and intelligent that they can conjure solutions to problems humans may not even be able to grasp, eclipsing the collective intelligence of the biological meatbots that ultimately created them. General AI, on the other hand, describes systems capable of learning new skills and applying theoretical knowledge to practical applications, effectively learning like a human being does. These systems are also purely theoretical today, with even the most optimistic AI researchers suggesting it will be years, or, as the Congressional Research Service said, decades before such systems emerge. And then there's narrow AI, which IBM describes as systems that can be trained to perform a single or narrow task, often far faster and better than a human mind can. However, it can't perform outside of its defined task. Instead, it targets a single subset of cognitive abilities and advances in that spectrum. And what this means is that every single AI agent, system, model, or algorithm in use today, from Siri in your iPhone to ChatGPT-4 to the agents DARPA is using to fly F-16s, all fall within the confines of narrow AI. These systems aren't capable of thinking outside the confines of the datasets and training that they're provided, and as such, are actually little more than extremely complex calculators. Now, AI can also be categorized into one of four different functionalities, including reacting machine AI, limited memory AI, theory of mind AI, and self-aware AI. Now, simple systems that you might not even be aware are considered AI, like the Netflix recommendations that appear on your screen when you log in, fall into that first functional category, reacting machine AI. And then just about everything that we tend to think of as AI today, from the generative AI models used to create images, videos, or music based on your written or verbal commands, right up through to the AI agents piloting the Air Force's F-16s, all fall within that second functional category, limited memory AI. And again, theory of mind AI, or AI systems capable of understanding the thoughts and emotions of other entities, and self-aware AI, systems capable of matching the complexity of human thought, are both theoretical at this point, rooted more firmly in science fiction than in science fact. I'm going to quote Colin Allen, a professor at the University of Pittsburgh who studies cognitive skills in both animals and computers. A conscious organism, like a person or a dog or other animals, can learn something in one context and learn something in another context, and then put the two things together to do something in a novel context they've never experienced before. This technology is nowhere close to doing that. Now, all this isn't to say that these more advanced and theoretical categories of artificial intelligence will never emerge, but it's very important to understand that when people talk about using AI to pilot aircraft, order pizza, or make playlists on Spotify, they're talking about limited memory, narrow AI. Conflating these systems with sentient, self-aware thinking machines capable of feeling emotions and then acting on them is sort of like conflating the radiation produced by your microwave with the radioactive fallout of a nuclear blast. Sure, there are similarities between the two, but one is decidedly more concerning than the other. And what this all means is that the AI agents being trained to pilot tactical aircraft for the US Air Force today are less like Tin Man from the movie Stealth and a lot more like highly advanced autopilot, capable of taking commands and executing them in a complex environment, potentially even better than humans could do in some circumstances, but still nowhere even close to being self-aware. And believe me, I know there will be people in the comments under this video calling me short-sighted and saying that we can't know how close to sentient these systems are, and they may cross that barrier any minute. But the truth is, that position, that sentiment is not based on evidence-based conclusions. It's not based on the opinions of experts in this field. It's not based in reality at all. It is born entirely out of cultural conditioning, from decades of us consuming media that tells us that artificial intelligence will come in the form of an omniscient doomsday machine. Rather than the extremely advanced forms of cruise control AI has manifested as in our world. And that brings us back around to Skyborg, which seeks to develop an autonomous aircraft teaming architecture that will allow advanced 5th and 6th generation fighters to not only fly alongside AI-enabled drone wingmen, but will also add AI agents into the cockpits of the crewed fighters as well, as a form of advanced automation. The end result, the Air Force believes, will be a revolutionary new approach to air combat that will serve as the cornerstone capability for an entirely new generation of fighters, commonly known as the 6th generation. The Skyborg initiative is just one of 4 Air Force vanguards, or top priority technology initiatives aimed specifically at maturing the most promising emerging technologies into significant tactical or strategic combat capabilities. Skyborg shares this distinction with another AI-enabled air power effort known as the Golden Horde, which is focused on developing networked, collaborative, and autonomous weapons that can coordinate with one another to locate, identify, and swarm targets with increased lethality. The other 2 vanguard efforts include the rocket cargo program we've discussed previously, which aims to leverage reusable rockets for global logistics, and the Navigation Technology Satellite 3, or NTS-3 effort, which are effectively more advanced and hardened GPS satellites. Now, Skyborg itself encompasses a variety of Air Force programs, including Project Venom, short for Viper Experimentation and Next Gen Operations Mode. This effort aims to build upon the progress already made by DARPA's Air Combat Evolution, or ACE program, that developed the AI that piloted the F-16 Frank Kendall rode in. It wants to incorporate similar AI agents into a half-dozen more fully modernized and combat-coded F-16s out of Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. Now, Skyborg and the capabilities it represents also play a vital role in the long-range strike bomber effort, which is producing, among other systems, the forthcoming B-21 Raider. But again, maybe most notable of all, Skyborg is seen as the foundation upon which both of America's 6th-generation fighters in development will be built. These fighters are the Air Force's next-generation air dominance fighters, slated to replace the F-22 Raptor in the early 2030s, and the U.S. Navy's F/A-XX fighter program, slated to replace the F/A-18 Super Hornet sometime in the mid-2030s. Now, the Air Force intends to award the production contract for the world's first 6th-generation fighter, that NGAD platform, sometime this year, and the branch already awarded Phase 1 contracts for the drone wingmen meant to fly alongside it, known as Collaborative Combat Aircraft, or CCAs, to Anduril and General Atomics this past April. And now that this video has given us a general overview of how the Air Force is trying to get AI into the cockpit of tactical aircraft, as well as the very real limitations of this technology, in Part 2, we'll dive into each of these individual programs, starting with DARPA's Air Combat Evolution, or ACE, effort. We'll dispel some of the myths and misconceptions surrounding the Alpha Dog flight trials that emerged from this program in 2020 and saw an AI agent pitted against a real human F-16 pilot in a series of virtual dogfights. We'll discuss how this effort made the leap to real aircraft, starting with the X-62 Vista, and soon in a series of combat-coded F-16s out of Project Venom. We'll discuss how these AI efforts will manifest in the next-generation air dominance fighter and its collaborative combat aircraft, before concluding with how all of these different systems, programs, efforts, and capabilities will coalesce into a new air warfare doctrine that I can describe as nothing short of a terrifying hornet's nest of technology and ordnance. But for now, I hope I've assuaged at least some of your concerns about AI, because the truth is, we have less to fear when it comes to AI going rogue than we do when it comes to AI functioning exactly as it's intended, in the hands of those who mean us harm. And with that ends yet another edition of Air Power from Sandbox News. I'm Alex Hollings. Make sure to swing by sandboxnews.com today and every day for all the latest in news, entertainment, and motivation from all around the Force. If you got anything out of today's video, make sure to click like and subscribe down below, and leave me a comment so I know what I should cover next. And of course, don't forget to tap on that bell icon so you never miss a drop from Sandbox News.